I'd like to welcome everybody to our weekly webinar. And as you know, for the last 3 weeks, we've been talking about psychographics, which is kind of the new technology that you need in order to figure out, is there demand for your services? Not just is there a ratio number that is acceptable, like you got no competitors.
Yeah.
Rather, it's to say you got competitors, but here's what they're looking for. How do you promote the practice? How do you determine the demand for a particular service? So trust me, that psychographic thing is dynamite. But today I thought I'd bring us back into a demographic area. Today we're going to talk about Greater Seattle. Now you may go, what? Seattle? Scott, you don't love Seattle. And the answer is, that's true. I really don't. However, I want to use Seattle as an example to teach you how to look at a municipal statistical area, a large city, multiple counties, multiple cities, to determine how do you know if there's going to be a place for you in a very complex geographic and demographic setting. And Seattle is about as hard as it gets. I mean, it is not a simple thing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Mike.
Okay. I've got the stopwatch started.
So do you have a topic today too, Mike?
That was pretty good. Yeah, I have a topic. That was pretty good. I think that may have been one of the fastest you've ever done it.
Thank you
Nice
very
work.
much. See,
Nice work.
I'm caring about what is important to you. Okay, now today the topic's actually 5 reasons to practice in Seattle, Washington. And again, I'm talking about Greater Seattle. And oh my gosh, who put that picture up? That's my granddaughter, who was born on Saturday. Her name is Lily Ann McDonald. Thank you.
What a gem. What a gem.
Grandpas just do that, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So it actually seems counterintuitive, but Seattle and its region are favorable for several reasons. They're not favorable for the same reason that other big metropolitan areas are. And we're going to go through how you know that. Now, it's not so much that the city is favorable, it's the market that has the potential. And that's what I'm referring to as Greater Seattle. Now, you can look at geographic areas in different ways. One of those is to say city boundaries. Great, and that's very easy for us to track. But let's say you're looking for a region that you're living in and you're thinking, I want to put a satellite practice somewhere, or a second office, or I want to find out who within the region might want to buy my practice. You've got to think outside the box in how you define locations. And Seattle, like I said, is pretty good. The municipal statistical area is what they call it, and it includes usually a larger area, but there is no set radius that goes with it. So frankly, it could be 30 or even, believe it or not, 60 minutes in the case of a very large MSA. In the old days, they used to call it a media market. And a media market was any place that would carry an analog television signal. And so if they had a television tower and they would cover a large geographic area, that's what they called a media market. But it doesn't really work anymore now that we've gone to digital broadcasting. However, believe it or not, weather stations and local television stations that do news are still considered the boundaries for a municipal statistical area. So Big Bob, the weatherman, will get in there and he'll talk about this area, this region that's going on. And that's, believe it or not, how they do it. Now, in Greater Seattle, it actually consists of 5 counties. King, or Seattle, by the way, and King County is by far the largest. Snohomish, which is near it, which is wherever it is, up in the north and off to the east. Thurston County, which is where Olympia is. Kitsap County, which is Bremerton. And Pierce County, which is Tacoma. Now, this is a very large geographic area. You already know about the airports called SeaTac. And it's kind of serving Seattle and kind of serving Tacoma. And we'll look at a map that'll help kind of explain it. Now, as you look at the counties, something to keep in mind, by the way, if you're ever interested in Washington State, almost all the population is located on the western side. And that's actually the area that developed first. It's also, by the way, where the Indian tribes were very big. And if you look at Snohomish and then look down below it with King and then Pierce, Thurston, Lewis, and by the way, Kitsap is actually across the sound from it. This is where the population density is. Now you can say, well, I want to have a practice in Skagit County near Mount Vernon. It is so isolated, as are places like Bellingham. They're not really considered part of the same statistical area, or MSA. You do, however, have almost nonstop interstate traffic that goes from one end to the other, which is a mixed blessing, as I'll talk about in just a second when it comes to transportation arteries. So let's look at it. You obviously know that Interstate 5 and, of course, 405 are the major interstates that go north and south. There is I-90, which tends to cut east and west. But for all intents and purposes, if you're looking for this MSA, you usually have to say, where is the interstate running? Because that is the factor that combines all of the areas. So if you look at where Everett is, for example, it's very at the top of that general area. Seattle is going to be on the west side. You've got Sammamish and Redmond on the east side of the sound, and then you kind of go down to Tacoma. Olympia, it's a little debatable. Some people go, well, that's not really in the MSA of Seattle. Culturally, it is, I have to tell you. You can also make the case that Bremerton, you can only reach, by the way, by ferry or by kind of going around the loop on the south side through Tacoma. You could say it's not really in it. But because the television signals and the culture of the area and even the commute supports it, you have to consider Bremerton to be a place to go. So I'm just saying this is an example of what is really, really tough about looking in an area and saying, could I put two practices in the area? Are they going to compete, or are they going to be separate from each other? Usually within the greater Seattle market, anything that is on the north-south axis within 15 minutes is going to be in competition with another practice. Just kind of keep that in mind. You know, I know this may sound weird. You may be completely bored by this topic, but there are people who are watching right now with a pencil and a pad, and they're writing everything down that I'm saying. If you want to have a practice site viability report, we can tell you exactly where the area will draw from and what the people are like. You'll also know, because this is what we do, who's in competition with you and who is not. That's kind of important because, as you know, Mount Vernon's up in the extreme north and Everett is a little closer into the Seattle. They're actually quite separate areas. Now, 5 reasons to move a practice or to practice in Seattle. Number 1, growth. It is hard to believe how much growth there is. Depending on the part of greater Seattle you're looking at, growth is about 1.5 to 3% per year. That is no small potatoes. Whenever you find a large statistical area like this that is continuing to increase in size, you realize you have something important. Growth is the life's blood of all practices. But in particular, medical practices or healthcare practices, you need to have an influx of new patients. So that's going to matter. And like I said, statistically, it's important. Now, I want to talk to you about the transportation situation here. It is a mixed blessing. If you happen to be located right near the light rail, it can be fantastic, my gosh. And that's because it goes where you probably want to go. On the other hand, the car commute within greater Seattle is getting so terrible, you're going to be in serious trouble. Now, what it has done, rather than have a big statistical area, it actually has identified certain smaller statistical areas, and that's where you are going to have to consider going. Do not plan a large commute in greater Seattle. You got to be close. So if you got to practice in Federal Way, live near Federal Way. I know that, I don't want to live in Federal Way. I want to live in Bothell. I got that. But the truth is, you want to reduce your commute as much as possible in any MSA that's large and growing. And they still haven't figured out how they're going to get people from one part of the area to another. Now let's talk about Seattle's quality of life. I should put finger quotes on quality of life. All right, here's where I hate this area and why I love this area. If you're the kind of person who loves getting out and seeing a bohemian society, a place where there are lots of interesting restaurants, entertainment is world class, fantastic vistas. The weather is a challenge for some, but fantastic for others. It's the quality of life that people move to the greater Seattle area for. They like the weather. They like that thing with people walking around with long, stringy hair. Okay? There is a real vibe that some people love about that. Some people hate it with all their hearts, and they swear that the people who run the counties and the cities are trying to run them out of town. Now, you can get away with this in certain parts of the United States, and Seattle's one, but so is Greenwich Village. So are parts of Baltimore. These are places that are interesting and not like everywhere else. But like I said, it's an acquired taste, and if it doesn't fit you, you're going to be looking for the exits almost all the time. But the quality of life, look, if Barnes & Noble's and Applebee's is about as much of adventure as you want from when you get out, Seattle's not the place for you to go. There are lots of other places for you to go. Now, there are some unique practice opportunities in Greater Seattle. When I say that, I mean there are people with serious money, lots of education. I mean, we got a lot. Per capita educational attainment is great, but the amount of money they make is crazy high, okay? Now, when I say this, I'm saying that if you look at some parts that I'll talk about in a second, some of these places have a median household income of $126,000 a year. That's median. That means there's as many people who earn more as less than that. And I'll just tell you, Redmond and Hillsborough, those are those kind of places. Look, there are some fantastic places, but you're also going to notice there's a lot of competition. I'll talk about that in a second. But the opportunities to have a practice that is not mainstream is high. People are willing to experiment and try new things, different treatment modalities. They are looking for 24-hour practices. They're trying to do some place that'll serve you coffee right in the middle of when your prophy's going on. Hey, I'm telling you, this is a unique place. The distribution of competition in the greater Seattle is important because, yes, there is competition, some very big competition, but you can go from this place to that place, and it's very different. In other words, the competition's distributed broadly all over the place. And as I was mentioning, Bothell and Redmond, look, those are places that have competition, but they have also very high turnover. And this is one of those kind of quality of life, opportunity thing, competition. There's so much turnover within Greater Seattle. A practice may have a great patient base, and in 3 years it'll be gone. People will pick up and move. And because of that, Seattle is reinventing itself almost all the time. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about opportunities. Now, everybody, we have that discount Miracle Max 49. I just want to encourage you to go to drdemographics.com. We offer specials all the time. And in fact, Mike and I were just talking about one just before we went on the air. But I'm going to let I'll let it happen online. I don't want to get ahead of myself, particularly because some people record these and listen to them 2 or 3 months later. And I don't want to mess you up because it's not going to last very long.
It's not, Scott. That is a great point. It is going to be a great special on a particular kind of report that we do not do specials on very often. However, I am biased towards this report because not only are you getting crucial demographic information, but you're also getting strategy. And that really is the distinguishing factor when you look at Dr. Demographics and some others that are out there that provide it. Numbers are numbers. Numbers mean a lot and mean nothing, frankly, because numbers should be actionable. And if you just look at the numbers and you don't know how to assign that to a specific action, then you're just paying for census data, essentially. And that's worthless in my opinion. And so with this report, you are going to get some very actionable information that you'll be able to put into place, and we'll see a return on investment. And that is really what all of us are, right? When we put an effort, we want to see a return.
The emphasis I want to place on this is there aren't other demographic companies that work in healthcare that do this. And that's because this is serious heavy lifting statistically, and they just don't know it. I'm not trying to say they're not good people and love their pets, although
they don't
too much. But all right. So Mike, take it away.
Well, I'm going to take it away, but I'm going to take huge issue. You need to understand that I came out of the womb with a Seattle Seahawks beanie on my head. Like, I have been a dyed-in-the-wool Seahawk fan since 1977, which, for those of you at home, the Seahawks came into existence about that time. So I have been a long, true Seattle Seahawks fan my entire life. Yes, I have suffered greatly because they've been a terrible team for the majority of that time. Was angry with the first Super Bowl that they were robbed, and then went through the great time when they were able to reach. I can go on a long time about this. When I went to Seattle, what was that, a year or two ago, something like that, to visit some practices out there. And one of my highlights of my life was driving past the Seahawks Stadium on my way into that area.
Wow.
So. Wow. I'm hurt deeply. Matter of fact, I'm hurt so deeply that today I'm gonna give some specific advice to some of the practices that are in Seattle, because frankly, we actually do a lot of reports for doctors in the Seattle area that are either already there or they are looking. Why am I not working here? Am I working, Scott? Can you see the right screen? Okay, now I'm here.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of reports for doctors in Seattle, and a lot of doctors that are looking at Seattle. And one of the things that we have to highlight, and Scott talked about a little bit, is the competition ratio. There is a lot of practices that have been there for a long time, and whether we're talking about Seattle Central or we're talking about Greater Seattle, specifically Southern Greater Seattle, where some of those areas that are growing tremendously, are really filled with bread and butter families, are kind of outside of that bohemian lifestyle that Scott was talking about, but are great and very attractive on paper areas. The one thing that is usually a sticking point is how much competition is there. And so I want to give a high five, a fist bump, and a head bonk to my Seattle brethren that have practices there, but also talk to some of you that are absolutely set on living and practicing in Seattle area, and how you might approach the competition challenge that you're going to face there. Because it's not an area that, in my estimation, as a marketer of 20 years, that you're going to be able to put an open sign on the front window and expect to be successful. You are going to have to be a little bit more active in the things that you're doing. So I want to go through 3 steps, 3 things for you to think about when you're looking at constructing that competition battle plan for your practice. So the first one is the evaluation stage. And we're going to talk about these 2 maps here in just a second before I get there. But the first thing you've got to look at is, what is not only A, your Google review profile or the review profile of the practice that you're going to be purchasing, and B, what is the Google review profile of your competition. Here's the thing. In this particular area, much like many other populated areas across the country, Google reviews are paramount. They're so important, and they will be probably one of the biggest things in making the decision point for mom and dad if they're going to bring themselves and their family into a practice. And so whether you are a pediatric dentist or you are an optometrist that's focused on pediatrics, or if you are a practice that's maybe even a prosthodontist, all the way up to where you're looking at retirees, you have an opportunity to really capture a huge part of the market by making sure and managing your Google review profile. Is something that there's a lot of doctors out there that haven't talked to me and worked with me that are letting go by the wayside, and the ones that are working with us and taking my advice, they're really investing in their Google review profile, and it's paying off in spades. And so that is the first thing that I would look at when you're evaluating your particular battle plan for your area that you're going to do. The next one is website stagnation. If you allow your website to sit there and it hasn't changed, it hasn't been modified, it hasn't been added to in the last couple months, not only the surrounding community and the areas that are still growing going to be able to notice that, but also Google is going to notice that. And you, because of the competition in this area, you will find your organic listings going further down into the search engine results, meaning that you were once on page 1, now you're on page 2, now you're on page 2000. And so that's something that you've got to focus on. And this is one area of the country that I do recommend that you focus and invest in search engine optimization, because it's going to be valuable for you in this area. That means that you are writing articles. That means that you are adding video, that you are adding new content to your website, and you're not allowing it to stay stagnant. The last thing in the evaluation stage that I would really recommend is that you look at the paid advertising efforts online for this area. Who is it that's advertising on Google AdWords, which is the area that is on this side right here, on the top and the side usually of Google search results? And who is it that's advertising on Facebook? Who's putting Facebook ads out there that are offering something to your chosen demographic that you're targeting for your practice? You need to know that, because there are some areas where the competition is very, very thick. And there's some areas that there really is nobody doing either of those two methods in that area. And so you have some great opportunity to slip in there and plant your flag in the mountain. Okay, so the next step is looking at the education piece of your particular practice. So here's the first thing, and don't get offended when I say this, but most practice owners are terrible marketers, meaning that in any given area, if an area is well marketed, that means that probably only about 20% of practices are actually marketing, which leaves 80% of the market that is not marketing. Now, that's in the marketing savvy areas. The areas that are more typical, especially in the greater Seattle area, and this is true for many other cities across the country, I would say that there's only 1 or 2 practices that are really filling the airwaves with their marketing, and they're absolutely owning that side of the strategy, meaning that there is a lot of opportunity for you to go in there and truly put your battle helmets on and grab your weapons and go to war when it comes to working and dealing with your competition. You have a lot of opportunities, because the majority of your competition that's down the road, they may have a fantastic sign, they might have a fantastic clinician group inside the practice, but they don't know how to market, they're not investing in it, and that means opportunity for you. The next thing is that you will do as we preach every single week, and you'll utilize your demographic and psychographic, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, psychographic data, because that is the key. And in my opinion, the silver bullet when it comes to marketing a practice is utilizing and knowing how to utilize those numbers and that information on your strategy. And I happen to know a group of people who really give you some good advice on those particular things. Now, the last thing is to always be on the lookout for new practices, especially in the area south of Tacoma, some of those areas down there that are still seeing some of those farmlands turn into housing developments. You will find that there are new practices popping up all over the place. And I know that because we're talking to a lot of them. A lot of them are calling us and asking for data. And so there are going to be some new practices opening up in that area. So you need to be aware and always be on the hunt for new practices that are popping up, whether they're going to be a competition for you or they're going to be a potential referral base opportunity. You need to be on the lookout constantly for those new practices. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is execution on a very consistent basis. This is where most practices fail. They get super excited. I'll talk to them and I'll do a consultation with them and give them a great strategy. And they are just super excited, like Jojo the circus monkey, to do that strategy for about 30 days, maybe 45 days. and then they'll fall back into old habits, and they'll go back in that category of terrible marketers because they don't know how to be consistent. That is when sometimes you need to have a little bit of help, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the first thing is that you need to establish a delivery schedule that you can afford. Don't do something that's too ambitious. And when I say afford, I don't necessarily just mean money. I also mean time. If you're going to follow my advice and do a video at least once a week, if you don't have the time for that, don't commit to that schedule, and don't tell your audience that that's the schedule you're going to be releasing things on, because you don't have the time to afford it. But you do need to budget in the right way so that you can release content on a consistent basis. The community will like that. Your particular fans will like that. And maybe most importantly, Google will like that and will reward you thusly. The second thing is be consistent with your message and market. Hey, if you have a practice viability report from us, a marketing report from us, then you have a really good idea of who the market is in your area, or at least what the potential is for you to be successful in your particular area. So if you can create an offer and some consistency with that particular group of people, I can guarantee you that you will see results over time that will be the foundation of the growth of your practice if you can do those offer-based consistency things throughout your marketing efforts, and do that on a scheduled basis. You'll see that key. So the last thing I want to talk about real quick is you need to know when to ask for help. Look, I get it. You're clinicians. You went to school to become fantastic doctors, and most of you.
Hello, this is Scott McDonald from Dr. Demographics.
Scott, you're not.
Sorry, am I live?
You're live. That's okay. No, you're welcome to interrupt me. I mean, I know whose name's at the bottom of my check. That's fine. So my point here is that you have to know when to ask for help. If you're finding yourself in a situation where you are not able to be consistent, where you are not able to have that schedule on key, then what you'll find is that you need some help. And whether it's accountability help, or it's strategy help, or it's execution help, we can help you with those things. We've done it for a very long time. Now, how do you get a hold of us? You do that by going to drdemographics.com and looking at the information we have there. Or if you have something and need specifically right now, feel free to reach out at mike@drdemographics.com. I'm more than happy to provide some feedback, some help, and some encouragement and some direction on what you need to do for your practice. We've been doing this for a very, very long time. We have looked at, analyzed thousands of practices over the years. We can help you. We can get you to the place where you're seeing success on a consistent basis. Scott, how did I do on time?
You did just fine. You know, frankly, I'm kind of amazed.
Good.
No, Mike, just as a quick note on what you were saying, ultimately the smart guys are going to do their research. And this is one of the things people say, well, how am I going to get an advantage? What am I going to do? There is no easy way to say there's no risk. You can mitigate your risk in how much money you spend on particular things by doing good research. But remember, the research itself is an investment. It will usually tell you something important that you need to know. I've just had 2 or 3 calls in the last couple of days where people are going, well, gee, I don't know if I want to throw my money away. And I keep saying, you're not throwing your money away. You're saving yourself by doing this.
Yeah.
Throwing your money away is where you just close your eyes and throw a dart. That's where it gets bad.
Right.
Anyway, Mike, you did well. Let me just throw out, next week I think we may do New York City, which will be kind of a big deal. A lot of people are out there. I'm hitting the major MSAs as we go around the United States. We handled the states that are doing particularly well if you look back in our archives. But I think we need to look at those big ones. And then eventually we're going to get down to Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland. That'll be coming up shortly as well. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for watching us. We love you so much. Get on the phone or the computer and, hey, contact us at drdemographics.com and take care.